For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also, Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him, who said to him, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you." As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek."
This notion of being called by God is something that floats around in church circles. Maybe you've had a calling in your life. I've been called to preach to you. Now, I want to let you know something. The way I see this church, and this may help you understand a little bit more of what is motivating me to be here on Sunday mornings. I truly see myself as being called to preach to you, not to prepare you to open the doors to a ton of visitors and for the people out there. I feel as if I've been called to you, and the Lord will bring people as he desires and he wants, and those people will stay or come as he chooses. What motivates me every morning as I prepare, my sermon or the message is what is going on in your life, not necessarily the life of the visitor who may come. It's just a different approach. Many churches switch that around. Their primary motivation is visitors, and then they get to you. It's just not the way I see it. I see it as you first. You're the family that God has called me to. All my eggs are in this basket. A higher calling, though, to be called by God. Guys, you're all called. What are you called to? That's a question I would love to see get erased in our minds. I mean, you're called to the life that you are living right now. You're called to walk in that by faith and by trust. How you operate in this life. Now, this is something that's ongoing, that is always being tweaked, I guess, or matured by God. I tell you, it was a tough week. Columbus Day, really. You take a day off in routine, and when you're a guy who lives by routine, it really throws a wrench in the work. So Wednesday morning, I think it was, and I had 9 bids down Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, and everything was scheduled out to the second. And I get in my truck, and and I'm pulling my rig around, and I've got no trailer brakes, and I just don't want to leave my yard without trailer brakes. I mean, the truck can stop, but in a case of emergency, you really need trailer brakes, and it was aggravating. And I'm out there at 6 a.m. just trying to get my brakes to work. And and I buy new things in the hopes to avoid the aggravation. It just doesn't work. And don't buy new stuff. Just Craigslist it. You're gonna have problems regardless. That's the. But I came undone. I was tired. I had a long day ahead of me, and and I do my best to filter my attitude and my language in front of my family, and it just didn't happen this morning. Anna heard everything she should not have heard, and so did my wife, and. You feel terrible in the moment. That's not the guy I want to be. In the moment, I know that. It's not the guy I want to be. I don't want to be a guy who's just spewing on my family because trailer brakes. I mean, it's the pettiest of things. But my daughter tells me, the school bus stop is at the end of the driveway, and I'm driving out, we get the brakes to work. Tell you, they just started working, and I drive down the end of the driveway, and I said, "Hey, they're working now." And Becca, my daughter, said, "Well, we prayed that they would start working," and I did nothing. They just started working, and I apologized to them for losing control of myself. And my daughter said, "Dad," said, "I believe in your heart." And I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, I believe in your heart, Dad." And In other words, I see through the outside stuff. This is, now my interpretation of what she said. This is what we do as pastors and preachers. You interpret. I know, Dad, who you are. I know what I just saw isn't you. I believe in your heart. And Jesus believes in your heart. He knows who you are. He knows what's becoming of you. He knows the new you inside. It reflects him. He believes in your heart. He believes in what's going on inside. But the problem is your circumstance and your situation that you react to oftentimes leads you astray to believe that he doesn't truly know who you are. That he reacts to you and to your behavior as a dad out of control, as a brother who he's not tamed at all. But what we're going to look at today is the gentleness of God. It has everything to do with Melchizedek. We're going to go verse 16, chapter 4, verse 16, the last verse before we get into Hebrews 5. With confidence, draw near to the throne of grace. Surely goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life. Draw near to the throne of grace that you may receive mercy and find grace to help in your time of need. The throne of grace represents what? A king, right? Our king is on his throne. Verse 1, for every high priest chosen from among men is it was Jesus king? Is he priest? Every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men, in behalf of you. Let's just make this really personal. On behalf of you, in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. So, was Jesus considered a priest or a king? How do you see Jesus? This is fascinating. We're going to dig through some layers here. It's going to be heady at first. Hopefully, we can keep you connected. Verse 2, Hebrews 5:2. We're going to breeze through a lot of these scriptures. He can deal gently with the ignorant and the wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Verse 3, because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifices, the high priest, for his own sins. We just got done. Jesus is this high priest, every high priest, for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. Verse 4, and no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. Keep that in mind. Aaron was called by God to what? To be a priest. Don't lose sight of that. That's important in understanding this here. So also Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, you are my son, today I have begotten you. That comes from a psalm, but we also see it reflected in his baptism. Verse 6, as he says also in another place, you are a priest forever. This comes from Psalm 110, also out of Genesis 14 is the story that this comes out of. You're a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek, let's call him Mel for sake of being hip and modern. Mel is a very mysterious person in Scripture, and he needs to stay this way for your protection. Okay? I open up Scriptures Monday morning. I know Melchizedek is on the horizon, and my instincts as being trained in seminary and all that is to go research the guy. And the first thing I told myself was stop. No, everything we need to know about Melchizedek is found in Scripture. It's about 12 words. And here's what guided this. The author of Hebrews is writing to mainly Jews that are scattered throughout the world. He does not describe Melchizedek to these guys. There is an inherent, inherited knowledge about Melchizedek that his readers already know. He has no need to explain who Melchizedek is, which tells me his readers already know what they need to know about this guy. My question for you is, well, God, do we know what we need to know about this guy, or do we need additional resources? It's all right in front of you. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. See, and this is part of my role, is to hopefully help teach you how to interpret stuff like this on the go. I'm telling you, you don't need additional resources. I set them all aside this week until the very end of the week. And I said, God, I want to be able to do this. If I was sitting in your seats, I want to be able to know who this guy is, why he's important, just with the scriptures and some cross references. So let's do it. Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. And Melchizedek, this is where Melchizedek comes from. Where in Genesis, Abraham has been called out by God, Abram still, and Melchizedek, Lot, his family, his brother Lot, was all kidnapped. So Abraham is all like, okay, we got to get my brother back. And so he has like 320, 30 guys. He says, let's go take out these kings. Let's get my family back. And he goes and he does it. By the power of God, who is the ruler of all things, Abraham with 300 some guys goes and defeats these nations and releases Lot. And it sounds like he takes a bunch of men captive and he releases his family from being kidnapped. And this is now what is taking place shortly after this incredible, miraculous defeat. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. King? Yes, king and priest. Melchizedek was a king and a priest. Now, I mean, we can get into like where did he come from and all that, but I mean, honestly, I believe it's all speculation outside of what we know in Scripture. So we're going to stick with this. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Very symbolic. Brings out bread and wine. And every second Tuesday of the month, or every second Sunday of the month, we remember what the Lord's done for us with bread and wine. Well, bread and grapefruit juice that we pretend is wine. Well, some type of juice that looks like wine. Okay, we are working this. He was priest of God Most High, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, Melchizedek. So, he wasn't a Jew. That's all you need to know. He wasn't a Jew. But he was a priest, called by God, not a Jew. Verse 19, he blessed Abram and said, blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. What does a priest do? He simply connects you to God. And this guy does it pretty well. And he does it very symbolically by pointing to the death of Jesus Christ to come. He's also just he's just kind. I mean, the guy comes out, maybe Abraham's hungry and thirsty. Guys, let's eat something. And just by the way, Abraham, God did this for you. Remember that. This is what he essentially says. Look at what God has done. The king of Sodom is also right there. Verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. That's what the king of Sodom does, okay? Verse 24, I wanted to add, we don't talk about money around here unless it's brought up. This is interesting, what Abraham does. I will take nothing, Abraham says, to the king of Sodom, but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me. All right, so I'm missing a verse, and it's important to this discussion. Genesis 14. Verse. Give myself 5 more seconds. We're moving on from it. There it is. Thank you for being attentive. Blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. This is incredible. That's called a tithe. I want to bring this up real quick because I think the view of giving money to God, a tithe, has been polluted in our church systems because a lot of people give tithes in hope of what they will receive from God, right? All right, so we a lot of people give tithe, and if this is the way you think about giving to God in hopes that He will bless you, flip that on its head, because Abraham destroys that notion just with this idea of the tithe. He gives a tenth of everything to who? The priest Melchizedek. And then the king of Sodom says, look, take all this possession for yourself. Give me the person. You take the goods for yourself. And Abraham says, verse 24, I skipped a few verses, I will take nothing but the young men have eaten. And who went with me? Why did Abram give a tithe? It was in response to what God has already done. In fact, he rejected the riches to come. He gives a tithe, and immediately the king of Sodom wants to make him even richer, and he says, no. I reject that. That comes from man. My tithe, my offering is in response to what God has done, not in what he will do. Who was Mel? Who is this guy? Why is he important? If you care to know, Salem, the king of Salem, was possibly the site of Jerusalem. So he may be ruling over the side of Jerusalem to come, but we don't know for sure. But what we do know is God clearly orchestrated this meeting. Mel brought out bread and wine. He brings out to Abraham bread and wine. Most important, he wasn't a Jew. He wasn't a Jew. So Hebrews 5 brings up Aaron. Do you have that? Can you pull up that verse? I don't think it's the next one. You got to go back a few slides. Hebrews 5 brings up Aaron, that God called and ordained Aaron. And the author of Hebrews chooses to say Melchizedek is the one that the order Jesus came after. No one takes this honor. No one takes the honor of being a priest for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. And then he says, Jesus was called by the order of Melchizedek. You got to understand, it's almost a slap in the face of all of Aaron's descendants, all the priests and the Levites to come. That Hebrews 5 basically says, no, that's not the order in which Jesus came by. He came by the order of a Gentile priest. Why is that important? Because Melchizedek did not have the Jewish law. Now, the Jewish law wasn't laid out yet in Genesis 14. I get that. But the author of Hebrews and Psalm 110, which was possibly the author was David, made it very, very, very specific. Jesus came after the order of Melchizedek. And what you need to know is that Melchizedek did not operate under the Old Testament law. He was a priest that operated under a different law. All you need to know. And we'll pull that together here in a few minutes. All right, go back to where I was, question mark, man. There we go. All right. Talk about the high priest. Hebrews 5:1. For every high priest, he can deal gently. I just wanted to show you who the he is. The high priest can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Okay, we got some of the heady stuff out of the way. You know who Mel is. You know he was a Gentile. Jesus is called after the order of Melchizedek. He did not operate under the Jewish law. Bring you into the equation. The high priest, Jesus, can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward. Who is the ignorant and wayward? I got a set of keys here. And I was thinking about this week. I don't think there's any other way to understand how Jesus deals with you without understanding that these keys unlock the jail cell of sin that you live in. So the Satan comes in the world and is in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and tells Eve, hey, look, you take a bite of this piece of fruit, your world's going to change something really, really cool. He's like, all right, we'll give it a shot, right? And in that moment, she's thrown into a jail cell of sin. All of mankind, Adam followed her, and all of mankind thrown into a jail cell of sin. And you know it. This is what I was talking about earlier. You know it. I mean, your struggle to get out of it every week, to find life and to find peace and to find hope, and you're trying to get out of this jail cell of just depravity, of just yuck, of unrighteousness. It's hard to put words to it, but these keys explain everything that's going on. So if you were a warden and you were guarding the jail cells, you know what you should do is from day one, tell your prisoners that these are the keys that will let you out. Now, clearly they're not, right? Clearly they're not the keys, and you know that. But pretend if from day one, the very first moment you were locked into that jail cell, the warden says, you'll never get these keys. They're going to always be on me. You will never get out of your prison of sin. You will never get out of your prison of addiction. I tell you, every addict in this room wants out. Every addict wants out. And every person who struggles with anger wants out. Every person who struggles with sexual sin wants out. But they don't know what they want out of and to go into necessarily. And they're reaching for the keys that are on the warden's belt. The problem is the warden deceived you. He pointed to the wrong keys. He's that crafty. He knows if he can capture your mind and get you to believe that these keys are the keys of the jail cell, he can set the real keys down right next to the jail cell. And you'll never know. Because your mind has been taken captive. And you will always believe that these keys are the real keys and they're on the... So you'll be reaching for these keys, but they'll never let you out. But it's the easiest way to guard the real keys. Just distract the mind of the prisoner. And so the keys are laying right next to you. And you'll never reach for them because you'll never know they're the real keys. So this image of the jail cell, how does Jesus deal with you? We got the word gently, ignorant, and wayward. The ignorant, they don't understand. They just don't understand the truth, but they don't know they're ignorant. Those who don't know that they're believing a lie believe they're believing the truth. This is the power of deception in the mind, is that it's not that you don't know you're stuck. It's that you've been led astray in how to get out of your prison. We all know we need something more in life. But we all don't know how to get there. The ignorant simply do not. The wayward has been led astray by deceit. And so you are lost and ignorant, and you'll never find your way. So this is where the idea of gently comes in. No, this is not the gentleness of Galatians 5. This word is only found in Hebrews 5. It deals with moderation and patience, because this is how you get to the truth to someone who is led by a lie. Moderation and patience. I think this is kind of cool. Maybe you feel like it's a little heady, but Aristotle says patience is the daughter of moderation. Now, we're going to connect this all to Melchizedek, and he was a Gentile, and he was operating under a different law, bringing you into this. Patience is the daughter of moderation. The high priest deals with you patiently. It's not that he doesn't deal with you. He's patient, and he deals with you in moderation. Gentleness lies somewhere in between frantic excitement and indifference. It's not that you're not responding to the prisoner in the jail cell. It's that you are responding, but with patience and moderation. And here's the reality. Jesus is the key. Guys, it sounds simple and elementary, but you just don't lose that. He is the key. I mean, there's nothing else in life that will replace or represent Jesus outside of himself. You will not come out of your struggle, your prison. You may not ever come out of it. But you're not going to come out of it finding life in and of your own means, because what's going on is some of you are so worn out because you're reaching for the wrong keys. You've been deceived and you're lost and you're ignorant and you don't understand that what you're reaching for is the deceiver, Satan, the powers of darkness has simply captivated your mind. You're looking at the wrong thing. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so what you've got to do is just stop the reach, stop the battle, and just, okay, we have to renew the way our mind, the way we think. Jesus is the key in letting you out. It doesn't mean defeat of your addiction. I want to make that clear because a lot of people, I think they, in their minds there's this utopia. I find Jesus, I find freedom from my sinful behavior. Well, maybe that's the case, but if that's your end goal and you never make it there, then the only conclusion is that Jesus was not faithful. God was not faithful. He let you down. A lot of people will go to their graves and stuck in their addictions and stuck in their behavior and be children of God. You see, what's going on is you're focused on the wrong thing. The key is not to end the addiction. The key is not to end the struggle. The key is to find Jesus and trust him in the midst of all of it. And watch what the shepherd does. He leads you to fields and pastures, and he makes you lie down. And then he begins to deal with you with moderation and patience in the midst of your struggle. And for many people, ironically, it is in that moment that the struggle begins to lose its power. He believes in your heart. He knows what you want to do. He knows you're reaching for the wrong keys, but he knows what's going on inside of you. He's the gentleness of the high priest says, I really know my children. I know they're reaching for the keys because they're reaching for me. They're just misplacing their reach. And in your desire to get out of your struggle, you're ultimately reaching for Jesus. But for the wrong, but towards the wrong thing. He can deal gently with the ignorant and the wayward. Those who don't understand, that's me and you. That's all of us. We're born in a world of deception. It is a process to renew our minds. And he could do it because he was beset with weakness. Man, what a fascinating phrase. He also struggled to trust his Father, but he did it. So what law is the priest operating under? Right? There is no, the Jewish law, Melchizedek did not operate under that, wasn't even in place yet. What law is the priest operating under? It's the same law you're operating under. But let's go to what Jesus did. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the law that was motivating Jesus. He came to love on you. He came to give himself for you. He came to die on your behalf, to serve you. This is why Jesus came. And now you, Romans 8:29, those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to what? To be conformed to the image of his Son, who was also after the order of Melchizedek. So you are called after the order of Melchizedek. You are called after the order of the high priest Melchizedek. So the law that he operated under, you also operate under. Romans 7:6. But now we are released from the law, having died to that which held us captive, so that we serve in a new way of the Spirit, not in the old way of the written law. And there it is, the clear difference. The new way of the Spirit, this is the new law we operate under, not in the old way of the written law. And what is it? Galatians 5:14, for the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. One more verse. Close here in a second. Love is the daughter of moderation. Love is patient. You are called also after the order of Melchizedek. You are called also after the order of Jesus to love one another. And the problem is, you keep reaching. You keep reaching. You keep reaching. Your hope is that this struggle, this sin, this pain will end. Okay, hold on to that hope. But that's not your real hope. That's not your primary hope in life. Your hope is kept alive in heaven, guarded by God himself. Your hope isn't, let me out of the cell and then I'll have life. Your hope is found in the midst of your struggle, in the midst of your problem, in the midst of your addiction. What did he tell the woman at the well? This woman is incredible. Go stop living with all these men. No. He says, come to me. You are thirsty, come to me and I will give you drink. He does not tell her, you need to stop what you're doing. Maybe she never stopped. We don't know. But what her command was to come to Jesus. Come to Jesus. It's that simple. Your new calling is a calling of believing and trusting in Jesus. He's the key to your life. I keep letters in my, I don't have many of them, just 2. I forgot I had them. I opened my sock drawer and there was a letter in there from a man who wrote a couple of his friends before he died, and I wanted to read it to you. This was a man, his name was Jack. I bring him up every once in a while here. It left a huge impression on my life. We stood at, he believed one theology, I believed something else. And he told me at one dinner that he could never talk to me again because my theology was different than his. It's fine, if that's what he wanted to do. He was boxed up in a lot of bitterness towards Reformed thinkers. And a week later, he told me to recant my theology. He would support our church financially. He would make all of our problems go away, essentially. And I told him I just couldn't do that. I would rather struggle financially as a small church than to, abandon the God I know. And he called me a week later and says, if you recant, we'll do this for you. I'll write you a support check and whatnot. I said, I can't do it. I just can't do it, Jack. And that's how our relationship started. And it turned out into I would go to his condo, and we would just sit and we would just talk. And I get to know a little bit more about him and about how pastors that he's encountered in the past just took advantage of him because of his money. And one guy had the gall to just say, hey, I need a Lexus. Will you buy it for me? And he did. But that was his taste of pastors and whatnot. And I was so glad that I wasn't part of that cycle. And that we could sit there. And I remember one of the last times we talked in his condo, his cancer, ravaged his body. And it just, he said, Greg, in the end, I kind of see things your way. But more importantly is, at least I know I got a friend. And he wrote this letter, and I want to read it to you. This is shortly before his death. Part of the reason I kept it, something I've learned, I guess, being younger, and some of you in here, when men and women, they're in their final stages of life, and they know Jesus, listen up. Because usually all the fluff of their theology falls to the wayside, and what's really important starts to percolate. And he broke it down pretty simply. He said, love is always the most important act. It comes to the top in all experiences. How much now that I remember love in my friendships is what's so important. I truly say with all honesty, I love every one of you for being part of my life. Hope to see you all again, if not down here, then up above. And he closed with this. He said, remember that Jesus loves each of you so much. He will forgive you of any and every sin, if you ask him. That's so true. So simple. You don't need me to tell you that. I mean, Jack is telling you because he's experienced it. In his final breaths, he's come to realize that he's found forgiveness. There is no sin so bad that Jesus won't forgive. Lastly, you will next hear of my dying. Don't you believe it? I love this part. Don't you believe it? I've only taken my last breath here on earth while taking my first breath in heaven. I am fine and will be waiting for you guys reading this. And I'm sure he would tell you, you're okay too. Doesn't feel okay. You're okay too. I mean, in the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the Son of Man did not even leave those three to suffer alone. You're not alone. I encourage you to believe in Jesus. Be saved. Be baptized. Be part of a family that knows who he is. Trust in him. And will walk this life with you. Heavenly Father,